You doing? Hope all is well. So I'm gonna do a little bit of reading from Silmarillion. Not really sure where it stopped last. Be sort of like sorted out right now. Most people probably watch this on the replay, and I think I'm going to also talk about a little bit of my first impressions of The Witcher Blood Origin in a little bit. Just trying to see where I stopped last time. So I think I was in the. I don't think I finished the. Probably gonna cross over some parts that I already read, because I'm not really sure where it stopped. I think I finished the whole thing. I think, yeah, it's just gonna be what it's gonna be. So I think I'm going to go ahead and just continue from the letter, because that's where it was. So as the stories become less mythical and more like stories and romances, men are interwoven. For the most part, these are good men. I'll just go through from there. So, as the stories become less mythical and more like stories and romances, men are interwoven. For the most part, these are good men, families and their chiefs who, rejecting the service of evil and hearing rumors of the gods of the West and the High Elves, flee westward and come into contact with the exiled elves in the midst of their war. The men who appear are mainly those of the three houses of the fathers of men, whose chieftains become allies of the elf lords. The contact of men and elves already foreshadows the history of the later ages, and a recurrent theme is the idea that in men, as they now are, there's a strand of blood and inheritance derived from the elves, and that the art and poetry of men is largely dependent on it or modified by it. There are thus two marriages of mortal and elf, both later coalescing in the kindred of Erendil, represented by Elrond, the half-elven who appears in all the stories, even The Hobbit, the chief of the stories of the Silmarillion, and the one most fully treated is the story of Beren and Luthien, the elf maiden. Here we meet, among other things, the first example of the motive to become dominant in hobbits, that the great policies of the world history, the wheels of the world, are often turned not by the lords and governors, even gods, but by the seemingly unknown and weak, owing to the secret in creation, the part unknowable to all wisdom but one, that resides in the intrusions of the children of God into the drama. It is Beren, the outlawed mortal, who succeeds, with the help of Luthien, a mere maiden, even if an elf of royalty, where all the armies and warriors have failed. He penetrates the stronghold of the enemy and wrests one of the Silmarilli from the Iron Crown. Thus he wins the hand of Luthien, and the first marriage of mortal and immortal is achieved. As such, the story, as I think, a beautiful and powerful heroic fairy romance received in itself with only a very general vague knowledge of the background, but it is also a fundamental link in the cycle, deprived of its full significance, out of its place therein. For the capture of the Silmaril, a supreme victory leads to disaster. The oath of the sons of Fëanor becomes operative, and lust for the Silmaril brings all the kingdoms of the elves to ruin. And lust for the Silmaril brings all the kingdoms of the elves to ruin. That's powerful. There are other stories almost equally full in treatment and equally independent and yet linked to the general history. There is the children of Hurin, The tragic tale of Turin Turambar and his sister Ninio, of which Turin is the hero, a figure that might be said, by people who like that sort of thing, though it is not very useful, to be derived from elements in Sigurd, the Volsung, Oedipus in the Finnish Kullervo. There is the fall of Gondolin, the chief elvish stronghold, in the tailored tales of Arendil the Wanderer. He is important as the person who brings the Silmarillion to its end, and as providing in his offspring the main links to and persons in the tales of later ages. His function as a representative of both kindreds, elves and men, is to find a sea passage back to the land of the gods, and as an ambassador, persuade them to take thought again for the exiles, to pity them and rescue them from the enemy. His wife Elfwing in Erendil's home is destroyed by the sons of Fëanor, but this provides a solution. Elwing, casting herself into the sea to save the jewel, comes to Erendil, and with the power of the great gem, they pass at last to Valinor and accomplish their errand, at the cost of never being allowed to return or dwell with elves or men. The gods then move again, and great power comes out of the west, and the stronghold of the enemy is destroyed, and he himself is thrust out of the world into the void, never to reappear there in incarnate form again. The remaining two Silmarils are regained from the Iron Crown, only to be lost. The last two sons of Fëanor, compelled by their oath, steal them and are destroyed by them, casting themselves into the sea and the pits of the earth. The ship of Erendil, adorned with the last Silmaril, is set in heaven as the brightest star. So ends the Silmarillion in the tales of the First Age. Let me just take a break for a quick second. So the next cycle deals or would deal with the Second Age, but it is on Earth a dark age, and not very much of its history or need to be told. In the great battles against the first enemy, the lands were broken and ruined, and the west of the Middle Earth became desolate. We learned that the exiled elves were, if not commanded, at least sternly counseled to return into the west, and there be at peace. They were not to dwell permanently in Valinor again, but in the lonely isle of Erisea, within sight of the Blessed Realm. The men of the three houses were rewarded for their valor and faithful alliance by being allowed to dwell westernmost of all the mortals in the great Atlantis Isle of Numenor. The doom or gift of the god of mortality, the gods, of course, cannot abrogate, but the Numenorians have a great span of life. They set sail and leave Middle-earth, and establish a great kingdom of mariners just within further sight of Erisea, but not of Valinor. Most of the high elves depart also back into the west. Not all. Some men akin to the Numenorians remain in the land, not far from the shores of the sea. Some of the exiles will not return, or delay their return, for the way west is ever open to the immortals, and the Grey Haven ships are ever ready to sail away forever. Also, the orcs, goblins, and other monsters bred by the first enemy are not wholly destroyed. And there is Sauron. In the Silmarillion and Tales of the First Age, Sauron was a being of Valinor, perverted to the service of the enemy, and becoming his chief captain and servant. He repents in fear when the first enemy is utterly defeated, but in the end does not do as was commanded, return to the judgment of the gods. He lingers in Middle-earth, very slowly, beginning with fair motives, the reorganizing and rehabilitation of the ruin of Middle-earth, neglected by the gods. He becomes a reincarnation of evil and a thing lusting for complete power. and so consumed ever more fiercely with hate, especially of gods and elves. All through the twilight of the Second Age, the shadow is growing in the east of Middle-earth, spreading its sway more and more over men, who multiply as the elves begin to fade. The three main themes are thus the delaying elves that lingered in Middle-earth, Sauron's growth to a new Dark Lord, Master and God of Men, and Numenor Atlantis. These are dealt with analytically and in two tales or accounts, The Rings of Power and the Downfall of Numenor. Both are the essential background to The Hobbit and its sequel. So I think outside of that, what I wanted to talk about a little bit is just to break it up, and I'll do a little bit more reading. Is so my first impressions, like I'm going through The Witcher right now, and I just really, I don't really, The Witcher Blood Origin, the writing is not really good. I mean, and that's like the nicest thing I can say about it. I mean, my first impressions on it really, and I did a quick short on it, and I'm working on some other stuff, another video right now. Is it's not really good. I don't even. I'm just kind of wondering why they like released it, because it doesn't make too much sense, and it doesn't even tie in with the other Witcher show. It just like I don't really see the link. I don't know how. I don't even know why it was made, like really. And I'm just talking like I try to like focus on different things than a lot of people focus on. So I was just, but it really, like I was watching it the other day, and I was just sort of like, this doesn't make any sense. I don't understand this show. Like I didn't understand, for example, like why Jaskier is in the first episode. I don't understand why he's in the show at all. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. Um, so for me, yeah, the plot, the first show, um, it doesn't work at all, and I don't get it too much. So that's what I want to say on that. I have a video I'm going to be working on it when I finish this live. So I'm going to do a little bit more reading because I enjoy it, and it seems like some of you guys enjoy it as well. Let's see, where did it go? So in the first, we see a sort of second fall, or at least error of the elves. There was nothing wrong, essentially, in their lingering against counsel, still sadly, with the mortal lands of their old heroic deeds. But they wanted to have their cake without eating it. They wanted the peace and the bliss and the perfect memory of the West, and yet to remain on the ordinary earth where their prestige as the highest people, above wild elves, dwarves, and men, was greater than at the bottom of the hierarchy of Valinor. They thus became obsessed with fading. The mode in which the changes of time, the law of the world under the sun, was perceived by them. They became sad, and their art, shall we say, antiquarian, and their efforts all really a kind of embalming, even though they also retained the old motive of their kind, the adornment of earth and the healing of its hurts. We hear of a lingering kingdom in the extreme northwest, more or less in what was left in the old lands of the Silmarillion under Gil-galad, and other settlements such as Imlandris, also known as Rivendell, near Elrond, and a great one at Eregion at the western feet of the Misty Mountains, adjacent to the mines of Moria, the major realm of the dwarves in the Second Age. There rose a friendship between the usually hostile folk of elves and dwarves for the first and only time, and smithcraft reached its highest development. But many of the elves listened to Sauron. He was still fair in that early time, and his motives and those of the elves seemed to go partly together. The healing of the desolate lands. Sauron found their weak point in suggesting that helping one another, they could make western Middle-earth as beautiful as Valinor. It was really a veiled attack on the gods, an incitement to try and make a separate, independent paradise. Gil-galad repulsed all such overtures, as also did Elrond. But at Eregion, great work began, and the elves came their nearest to falling to magic and machinery. With the aid of Sauron's lore, they made rings of power. Power is an ominous and sinister word in all their tales, except as applied to the gods. Yep, this is the little bit that that Amazon used. The chief power of all the rings alike was the prevention or slowing of decay, i.e., change viewed as a regrettable thing. The preservation of what is desired or loved or its semblance. This is more or less an elvish motive, but also they enhance the natural powers of a possessor, thus approaching magic, a motive easily corruptible into evil, a lust for domination, and finally, they had other powers more directly derived from Sauron, the necromancer, so he is called, as he casts a fleeting shadow and presage on the pages of The Hobbit, such as rendering invisible the material body and making things of the invisible world visible. The elves of Eregion made 3 supremely beautiful and powerful rings, almost solely of their own imagination and directed to the preservation of beauty. They did not confer invisibility, but secretly in the subterranean fire in his own black land, Sauron made one ring, the ruling ring that contained the powers of all the others, and controlled them, so that its wearer could see the thoughts of all those that used the lesser rings, could govern all that they did, and in the end could utterly enslave them. He reckoned, however, without the wisdom and subtle perceptions of the elves. The moment he assumed the one, they were aware of it and of his secret purpose and were afraid. They hid the 3 rings so that not even Sauron ever discovered where they were, and they remained unsullied. The others they tried to destroy. And on that note, which I think is a powerful note, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks so much if you've gotten this far. If you want, check out some of the other videos on the channel. Like if you want. Have a great one. See you later.